Take your vision and your production budget further in Minnesota. Pick a season. They have 4. Pick a landscape. Think rolling prairies or dense, untouched forest. Pick a setting. Urban vibe, picturesque river towns, or up north lake cabins. And then top it off with lucrative incentives, including a 25% transferable tax credit, stackable regional incentives, and significant tax exemptions. See how you can benefit from, well, the benefits of Minnesota at exploreminnesota.com/film.
When are schools going to open? And when you don't know, when you don't have an end date, it's just mentally so difficult.
Welcome to the Ankler Podcast. I'm Elaine Lowe, author of the series Business Newsletter. This week, we're going to take a look at a somber anniversary coming up. It's been nearly 6 months since the L.A. fires, and the Ankler's own Nicole Laporte spoke to director Leslie Linka Glatter and many others who lost their homes in the fires. We'll talk about how she and others in the Hollywood community are rebuilding their lives and moving forward, and the lasting impact on both Los Angeles and the entertainment industry. Sean, Natalie, and myself are also discussing the upcoming California tax incentive increase, as well as a look at the summer box office, including what's shaping up to be a pretty major Pixar flop. But first, we're going to start off with our usual look at this week of the business of Hollywood. So welcome back to our pod, regulars Sean McNulty of the Wake Up newsletter and Natalie Jarvie of Like and Subscribe, who I trust has brought us back souvenirs from the French Riviera.
Bonjour. Should I do this whole podcast in French?
Oh, please. I would love that.
My French accent is pretty famous around here, Elaine. So, listen.
Mm-hmm. Let's hear you say croissant one more time, Sean.
I'll say croissant. I prefer that over. That's more my favorite. Yeah. Baguettes and nothing. No pastries, Natalie. Really, come on.
Oh,
nothing.
I ate so many pastries. And
for us, not for you.
So first up, we've got another sign that YouTube has a target on its back. Last week on the pod, we talked about Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos taking a little dig at YouTube and the response from YouTube CEO Neil Mohan when he talked to Janice Min at Cannes Lion. Now this week, Natalie, you've got a scoop on a leaked Spotify pitch deck that reveals a big push into video, which sure makes it look like the music streamer is coming for YouTube. Now, you start off your story by mentioning that one of my favorite YouTubers, Nick DiGiovanni, has the #1 arts podcast on Spotify, which, okay, like he does like cooking YouTube stuff and food YouTube. So let's get into that in a bit. But he doesn't even have a podcast. He has his YouTube channel, right? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, Nick does not have a podcast, yet he has the #1 podcast on Spotify.
Make it make sense, Natalie.
Let me tell you, I spent so much time yesterday, going through the Spotify charts, trying to figure out, who was a podcaster, who was a YouTuber, and what was going on there. But the big takeaway is that, yes, Spotify is going big on video. They have been for some time, but they started their pitch really focused on podcasters who have video elements to their podcasts. And now it seems like they are focusing more of their attention on attracting any old creator from YouTube who has videos who wants to upload them to Spotify.
So we're not talking about listening to the audio of these videos. We're talking about just watching embedded video on the Spotify platform.
Yeah, I mean, basically you can watch a Nick DiGiovanni video on Spotify just like you could on YouTube. It's really no different. I guess the idea being that, certainly Spotify wants to keep people within their walled garden, right? So they figure, hey, people are here, they're watching more video already. Let's give them more of that and maybe they'll stick around even longer.
So why now? Why is Spotify going after video creators now? And what's the pitch here?
Yeah, so they've been going after video creators for a bit, but I think what they're seeing is that video is working. When they have video on the platform, people are watching it. People are spending more time on the platform watching video. So let's continue to feed that essentially and give them more of what they want. And why are creators doing this? Because there's money to be made and, creators are always looking for ways to diversify their revenue streams. So, it's a question of you either take the money from Spotify or you don't. So some creators are starting to take the money, of course.
Yeah, fair enough. And, Sean, you cover quarterly earnings much more so than I do these days. How closely are you looking at Spotify? How saturated is the traditional pod space getting nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, here's the interesting thing about scope. So, Elaine, you mentioned the motivation, right? Why now? And Natalie, Spotify's been trying to do video for a little while now. This isn't exactly
who doesn't love a good pivot to video.
It's their third or fourth pivot to video.
How many times is this their, hey guys, we're now doing video? Like, I don't know how many, earnings and things. So this one seems to be maybe a little more traction, Natalie, to your point, but this is not the, new idea. But look at the revenue. So Q1 revenue for YouTube was $8.9 billion. Q1 revenue for Spotify was $4.8 billion. So Spotify is about half the revenue of YouTube. That YouTube revenue is all ads. That doesn't include YouTube Premium or music. That's not their subscription. For Spotify, that is ads and that is, subscription. So ad revenue at Spotify is about $500 million in the first quarter. That's about 10% of revenue. They're trying to keep growing that. How do you do that? Paid subscriptions are still growing and globally, but more in regions that are not paying as much for Spotify as, so the growth is not in America or Europe. It's in, rest of world or APAC. So they're finding ways to, how do we increase revenue? How do we do that? We increase our advertising business. What's higher revenue in advertising? Video ads over audio ads. So that's why you're seeing this movement. That's the kind of the chicken or the egg here.
Right. Yeah. And when you're looking at the battle strictly between Spotify and YouTube, Natalie, like how worried should a YouTube be about Spotify entering this business? I mean, is it kind of a concern or not really?
I don't think it's really a concern at the end of the day. I mean, everyone wants a piece of the YouTube pie right now, as we've talked about. And, creators have largely found that they can, distribute their programming non-exclusively across a lot of different platforms and still maintain their audience on YouTube. Sure, some people might decide, oh, hey, I'm already on Spotify. I'll just watch my favorite creator here too. But YouTube still has a much, much larger video inventory than Spotify has or probably will ever have. And so, they're the ones to beat, and it's going to be hard to beat YouTube.
Well, anybody else with a pitch deck that they want to share with us, make sure you email podcast@theankler.com. In other news this week, California lawmakers have given the okay to Governor Newsom's proposal to more than double the state's tax incentive for TV and film production to $750 million a year. A lot of people, I'm sure, are very happy about this one today. That is scheduled to go to a vote on Friday. That's a big deal, Sean, isn't it?
I mean, it was a big question. Can Gavin get it across the finish line? He's proposed this, and it's a big, important mandate for him. So clearly, he probably used a lot of his heft there to get it through. But it's fingers crossed, Elaine. We're waiting a final vote. You never know.
You never know.
That's, and there are other additional bills.
Right. Little companion things like it's allowing for more types of production, animation, competition shows, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And upping the percentage from 20 to 35% for certain projects. So, we'll see if that. Those are two separate items, so we'll see if that all gets through. But it seems like the big thing that they've been asking for is going to happen. It's like, all right, let's see if who comes back at this point. So
the California Film Commission is forecasting that the increased incentive could bring back somewhere between like 45 and 5,500 jobs back to the state. So everybody's cheering for that, of course.
Not bad, yeah, not bad.
All right, lastly, before heading to the break, it's time to take a look at the summer box office so far. Pixar, once reliable for home run after home run, now is, insert appropriate sports metaphor here, John.
I just stumbled. That did it for me.
I don't know. No, Sean.
You give us no tennis term for this.
Natalie, what's the NFL term for this now?
Oh my gosh.
They got sacked. Maybe at the box office would be maybe along those lines.
Elio, not doing so hot, right?
Yeah, we'll see. It's but it is the lowest Pixar opening of all time, and we dove into this on the Monday Morning Quarterback this week with Katie and Chris jumping in there. But look, it is it's the newest family film going into July 4th weekend, and the July 4th big movie is Jurassic World. There's no Minions this year, so perhaps it gets the sale. And when did it sales at that point? It's a long summer. We'll see what the second weekend is, but this is just bad. So
there's no Minions this year.
There's no Minions.
That's the pull quote.
Yeah,
that would have dominated the summers. That's still a guaranteed.
That's their 4th of July is their window when they go there.
I didn't realize that was a Minions weekend.
That is the Minions weekend. Typically speaking, Universal is just another going with the Velociraptors or whatever they're doing this year. The ones that do they go the underground? They underwater now.
It's like a lot of mutant dinosaurs. Yes, I've seen Jurassic World Rebirth. As a Jurassic completist, my whole family is. Yes, that's a real theme park of a movie.
My 4-year-old has
exactly.
already made me memorize so many dinosaur names. I don't know that I can add mutant dinosaurs to the mix, Elaine.
Well, this is definitely not for the 4-year-olds, this movie.
No.
So you have a few
Oh yeah,
years
this
on
one's
that
like a little
but,
horror adjacent. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
Elaine-
know if
Elaine's
I'd bring
still-
the kids to this one yet.
Elaine's still recovering. But yeah, then we got good old Megan coming back. I saw them went to the premiere last night. That was fun. Then good old Brad Pitt in F1, which this is getting the award for most hot takes on what everybody thinks this movie's going to do. This one I've heard.
Wait, when does that come out?
Both this Friday. Right?
Oh,
This Friday,
all right.
yeah. So going into Jurassic isn't until next week. So, but yeah, F1 is a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on F1. I'm very curious to see where this one comes in because there's a lot of people, a few haters out
Big
there.
star, same director as Top Gun Maverick, right?
Yeah. Jerry Bruckheimer, producing
Got all
there.
the ingredients for a summer blockbuster.
There are just a lot more. Said more haters out there than I would have thought, Elaine. I was coming out of the woodwork on this one, so I'm seeing that tonight. So I'll make my judgment at that point of what I think it is. I'm optimistic. I'm in the optimistic camp at this point, but that one is going to be one to watch this weekend, Elaine.
All right. Thanks so much, Sean and Natalie. We're going to take a quick break. And after that, I'll be back with Nicole Laporte to discuss how the entertainment community has been rallying back from the devastating LA fires and how the city and the industry are both moving forward. That's right after this.
Take your vision and your production budget further in Minnesota. Pick a season. They have 4. Pick a landscape. Think rolling prairies or dense, untouched forest. Pick a setting, urban vibe, picturesque river towns, or up north lake cabins. And then top it off with lucrative incentives, including a 25% transferable tax credit, stackable regional incentives, and significant tax exemptions. See how you can benefit from, the benefits of Minnesota at exploreminnesota.com/film.
Welcome back to the Ankler Podcast. I'm Elaine Lowe. It's been almost 6 months since the start of the LA fires that hit the Palisades and Altadena, devastating local communities and burning down more than 16,000 homes and structures. Among those affected, of course, were thousands of people who worked in the entertainment industry and half a year on are now rebuilding their lives and getting back on their feet. So with us here today is Ankler contributor Nicole Laporte, who talked to a number of industry workers who lost their homes and can walk us through the impact on both the city and the business and offer up some wisdom for those who are in the rebuilding process. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, Elaine. Thanks for having me.
So tell us, Nicole, 6 months on, how are people coping with the loss?
6 months in, I would say, there was one quote from someone in the industry that I think, when I spoke to her, it really summed it up. And it's a really simple quote. And it is, people are not okay. And we think they're okay. I say we, meaning, people who are lucky enough to not have had this affect us. But in fact, people are dealing with this still on so many levels, whether it's insurance claims, whether it's kids who have had all of this crazy adjustment and maybe are in a totally different school and they're sort of dealing with that. And still, someone texted me today about their child who's like a 5th grader, can't really deal with change right now and doesn't want a different person to cut her hair. And I think these are things we don't even think about. There are people that are being forced to move back into, maybe their home is still standing and they're kind of being forced to move back in because they don't have, the insurance money that was covering rent has run out, but maybe the house isn't totally cleaned yet. It's really a state of limbo. I think mentally people are still just feeling very displaced. And most of all, just the insurance headaches. Almost everyone I spoke to is having issues with insurance. They're really not pleasant. They're being lowballed. They're not getting checks that are nearly the value of their homes or their content. So it's really not a good place.
And I want to get into the insurance of it all in a little bit. But first, something you said reminded me of something that director and DGA president Leslie Linka Glatter had said to you, that she's kind of approaching it. You're dealing with all this change, being in limbo right now. She approached it in a way that's kind of unique and maybe familiar for Hollywood folks who are used to going from one place to another and having many different homes during the year.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that Leslie kind of framed this experience similar to the way she would approach a directing job or producing job by choosing to relocate to a location that was actually very far from her home. She had a home in the Palisades that was completely destroyed. And she was able to take virtually nothing out of it. By the time she got to the house, it was basically gone. She was able to grab one Hoka sneaker, she said, and a computer before she had to race out of there. But she, a lot of people in the Palisades relocated somewhere fairly nearby, whether it was Santa Monica or Brentwood, or I know a lot of people I talked to just said they still wanted to stay in areas that were familiar to them, or maybe their kids were in schools that were on the West Side. So really the Palisades kind of has stayed for the most part on the West Side. But she said, look, I'm a director. I'm basically an itinerant filmmaker. I'm used to being on a set. I'm used to not being at home. I'm going to get as far away from this as I can and just kind of psychically disconnect and distance myself. So she's renting a home in Outpost. And she said it's actually been really mentally kind of a nice escape because she is not surrounded by it. She's just kind of treating this as like, I am having an experience that is not all that different from, working on a set or being, going on location to Atlanta or whatever.
Which psychologically is doing what you got to do to get through it, right?
Yeah. She was like, otherwise I would just be living in this sadness every moment. And this kind of allows me to disconnect and kind of, get out of it for spells. So yeah, but honestly, she was the only person I've spoken to that's staying in LA. A lot of people just left the city or left the state. But for those who stayed in LA, most of them are. And also, I should say on the Altadena side, too, they're really staying in Highland Park. I mean, I think that there's just something familiar. They don't want to totally leave their home. That's where their friends are. So, yeah, she was very unusual.
And Nicole, there's something that music producer Greg Wells, another fire survivor, something he told you that really struck me.
It really just feels like we are stuck in some sort of grotesque anxiety dream we can't seem to wake up from. I mean, we loved living there, and the idea of getting that back is wonderful. I think it's not likely that it's possible, and I don't know what we're going to do. And it's hard for me because I like to make decisions quickly and assertively, and this is a situation where you just can't do that. There kind of is no good decision to make.
So hearing him speak, what's your sense of how people have been able to move forward with their lives and with work? It must be so tough to move forward with work when your home is in such a state of disarray still.
Yeah, he was really interesting. And he also talked about how, as a music producer, as a songwriter, as someone who's so incredibly successful, I mean, he's working on Wicked 2 now. He's done The Greatest Showman. I mean, he's at the top of his game. So it's no surprise that he's a very decisive person, but there is no good decision and you just can't be decisive. There's so many unknown factors. But what he then kind of went on to talk about was he's working, and I think that is the answer to your question is everyone I spoke to at least are very grateful to have work. And that's kind of what's keeping them sane. So, he's working on Wicked 2 now. Almost everyone I talk to is writing projects or they have work lined up. And I think a lot of people, it's just they're compartmentalizing. So it's like they have this kind of hell that's going on in terms of dealing with insurance and dealing with, just the emotional toll, all of which is, just incredibly difficult. But then work is almost a place where things make sense and you know how to do it and you know what your meeting is going to be like and you know your schedule. And so I think a lot of people are sort of having this, it's like almost like dual lives. And by the way, like the insurance and all of this, it is a full-time job. I mean, when people are talking about going through and itemizing every, as the term is, content of their home, from silverware to dishes to books, that's a full-time job and it's not a pleasant job. So I think work in a lot of cases is kind of a very nice escape for them.
And, speaking of work, yeah, it's nice to just have work in this environment, right? When work has been so sparse these last couple of years. But, Greg was someone who didn't just lose his home in the fires, but also his brand new recording studio. A lot of people who work in entertainment, they do that work from home with hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars worth of audio or video equipment that they need for these jobs. For people who lost part of their professional property in the fires, I'm wondering, does insurance cover those items as well?
Well, he had a really horrible experience. He had just built this studio. He said it was, all top of the line. He literally was like pinching himself over the fact that he could like wake up in his pajamas and go work on Wicked or whatever soundtrack he was working on. And horrifically, it was not insured.
Oh, man.
And then, yeah, he had a really horrible experience. He'd been on Nationwide insurance, which is one of the many that sort of ditched all of these California policies last year. So he switched to another policy, which was almost like double the cost. And in hindsight, it's crazy, but because it was so expensive, he was sort of like, oh, well, I don't need to insure my whole house. So he opted for less coverage. And that decision was made last year. So of course he's in disbelief. And what he did end up getting from his current insurance was, went straight to his mortgage. I mean, he really lost everything. So yeah, he's really in kind of a state of shock.
Yeah, I remember talking to a TV director, Jeff Hunt, in mid-January, shortly after the fires had started. He had lost his home in the Woolsey fire back in 2018 and had really aggressively pursued like permits for construction and rebuilding. And he managed to rebuild his home basically from the time that it burned to completing that construction. It took just 24 months, which is, really a fast-tracked timeline. But I remember he was telling me that it could take months and months and months to finally get the full amount that you deserved from insurance. And, it causes a lot of anxiety. It causes a lot of sleepless nights. But I remember him telling me, he said, don't freak out. To the people who are going through this process now, he's saying your insurance is going to give you the money, and that 6 to 9 months out, your house might still look the exact same way it did after the fires, depending on where they are in the cleanup process. And that for him, it took them about a year for his insurance company to write that final check that would allow them to rebuild their house. So it's like they really make people jump through a lot of hoops, it sounds like.
Yeah. And I think what you hit on that's so hard for people is there's just no date. You don't know. And sort of when I was reporting on this, it just brought me back to like the COVID mindset when you just don't know. Like when will masks be lifted? When are schools going to open? And when you don't know, when you don't have an end date, it's just mentally so difficult. And everyone is in a different stage of this and everyone is going through their own experience. I mean, some people, I did talk to a few people where insurance wasn't, it did actually work out. And some people, if they had like the person you're talking about, if you had like rebuild plans right before the fire, that actually is going to help you sail through the permit process. So there's so many factors. But yeah, whether you're having to itemize the contents of your house and then submitting them and then insurance is coming back. I think this was Leslie Linkeglatter's case. The insurance then came back and said, well, no, we need the depreciation dates. And she's like, well, wait, you never asked for that. There's a lot of like, the bar keeps shifting. The insurance asks you to do something, you do it, and then, well, wait a minute, you didn't include this. So yeah, it's kind of a tale of woe across the board.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that a lot of people are able to just sort of bury themselves in work right now, just keep themselves moving forward. I mean, what's your sense of how people's careers have been impacted? Obviously, the loss of something like a brand new recording studio is really hard to swallow. But, there's also just the uncertainty, that undercurrent of uncertainty that you were just talking about, where it's like, if you don't know where the end of the tunnel is, it can make it really hard to focus on work. I mean, do people feel like it's had a real impact on their careers or where they are professionally?
People really talked about how gracious and generous and forgiving companies and studios and networks were when this happened. And I think it extended.
Like with like deadlines and things?
Yeah, deadlines. Or someone talked about there was an extra house available that you could live in for a few months. Or yeah, the studio, like everyone and how much time do you guys need off? And don't worry about it. And Will Beal, another screenwriter, said, he kind of joked, like he was working on a film and he turned it in on time. And he's like, yeah, I think I got extra points because they're like, oh yeah, that guy had to deal with the fire and he actually made deadline. But I think I actually didn't talk to anyone whose careers were negatively impacted by this other than just like the difficulty of having to keep on working while you're going through this. But I think as a whole, Hollywood really stepped up and, supported everyone involved in the fire and was really behind them. The question is now going forward, I think there's a little bit of an expiration date on that. So what's it going to look like the next 6 months when maybe you need to take 2 weeks off to go deal with something or, I don't know.
Yeah. So just a continued plea for patience from the industry, because it's like, yeah, 6 months may feel like a while to people who didn't lose their homes, but the people who did are very much still going through this.
Yes, totally.
And LA is like, it's a town that's been through a hell of a lot these past 5 years, right? Like from the pandemic to the writers and actors strikes to the fires in January to the current immigration raids. It's a company town. And what impacts the city has always had an impact on Hollywood as a business. What's your sense of the longer lasting hit that the industry is taking from all of this turmoil? I mean, like the fires on top of everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so many people left over this. I mean, almost
Mm,
everyone I spoke to when I said, okay, where did people go? Like, are there any
yeah.
hubs? Like, are there any new neighborhoods? And inevitably they would say, well, this person left the state. This person, I mean, we're losing
Mm,
people, and it's not
yeah.
just in entertainment, but it's including, and the state of the entertainment industry just makes it worse and more appealing to leave. But I just think every time there's kind of one of these big craters that rocks the industry, like you're going to lose bodies because it's just too difficult. So I think that's sort of, the longer term question. And then, yeah, I mean, you talked about like the ice raids. I feel like people who are dealing with the fires and the aftermath, I think they sort of feel that, oh my God, now there's ice. Now there's something else to distract everyone else from what we're still dealing with. And I feel they then feel a
Mm,
little bit more removed because the headlines are this week. And these are big
yeah.
things. I mean, the ice raids and whatever Trump's doing, like the collective consciousness is turning away from the fires. And I think they sort of feel like, wait a minute, we are still in the middle of this. Like, don't forget us yet.
It's basically like dealing with a death, right? I mean, it's like, people come and check up on you immediately after you've lost a loved one. And then, a couple months out, you always hear, it's like 6 months to a year out, people stop knocking at your door. And it's like, but that loss, that grieving that you're going through, it's still going on. It's not done yet.
Well, no, I mean, you say death, and someone actually just, not anyone I interviewed for this, but someone literally who's a friend of mine who lives in the Palisades, her home is still standing. But she said something when we were talking about, she's like, yeah, it's like there was a death, but then you realize, oh, but no one really died. I mean, some people did, but it certainly most people thankfully didn't. But it is that same feeling of like a death. Like, and I think, yeah, they're still grieving.
But, it's a really resilient industry. All the people you talk to sound like they're looking ahead. They're moving forward. I know you talked to Jed Weitzman, the head of music at Victory Live, another fire survivor, and he feels like the town is pretty resilient.
What are we coming home to? That's the other thing. No clue. I hope that, everybody rebuilds. I don't know. I think a lot of people don't know. The Palisades is going to come back. It is a resilient community of smart people who very much want to come back here. As I sit here speaking to Nicole, it's looking at the ocean. I couldn't be luckier. There's a lot to come back to. I just don't know what it all means yet.
Yeah, Jed is great. He was lucky enough to have his home still standing, and he's been able to kind of get through all of the insurance and remediation processes pretty easily. And yeah, he's preparing to move back in August or September. He's also very involved. He's on the executive committee of Pally Strong. So he's very hands-on in the rebuilding and trying to cut through red tape and just get things moving. And we talked a lot about just the feelings that people have for the Palisades. And it's the same in Altadena. I think they're both these communities. People love these locations and these communities, and they are very invested in bringing them back while acknowledging that it's not going to be exactly the same for lots of different reasons. But it's a lot of like-minded people, both in in each community, in the Palisades and in Altadena, that just have a lot of passion for the places, for the rituals, whether it's the 4th of July parade in the Palisades or the Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Altadena. And they're not just going to walk away. Like, they are going to come back in one form or another. So I think that's what both of these areas have going for them. Just a lot of people who are very committed to what each location stands for, whether it's for family reasons, for generational reasons, having relatives there. So yeah, I think you are definitely going to see both of them come back. It's just a matter of how quickly and what exactly it's going to look like.
Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, we're seeing the industry move forward. We're seeing people in these communities move forward and really come together. I mean, altogether, just a really remarkable show of resilience here. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicole. Listeners, you can read her full story at theankler.com. It's well worth a sit down with this. You talk to some really remarkable folks.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, that's all for us today at the Ankler Pod. Big thanks to Nicole Laporte, Sean McNulty, and Natalie Jarvie for being on today. And make sure you leave us a review and rating wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure to subscribe as well to our suite of newsletters and podcasts at theankler.com and follow us on social at The Ankler. I'm Elaine Lowe. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.